Hello, this is Greg Allison Green Greg's coming to you on the 6th of January, 21. Time on deck is 19:10 hours Central Standard Time. And tonight we have with a special guest. I got to be able to mute this. We have a special guest with us. There we go. He is the David T Pyne. Mr. Pyne is the Deputy Director of the National Operations and Congressional Liaison for the EMP Task Force on National and Homeland Security, which I happen to be the Alabama State Director for. And some of you may recall that I've had Dr. Peter Pry on this channel several times. He is the director of this organization. So we're an august group of individuals who are working hard to make sure our power grid is intact. And David Pyne does a lot of work in that area, but he also branches and goes above and beyond that because he's worried about the situation in our world today, the situation in which we are facing military challenges from Russia and China. And you may recall he's been on my channel once before. We talked about the prospects of having to face Russia and China together. And Mr. Pyne is good at coming up with out-of-the-box innovative solutions to try to deal with these situations. And he's quite published in a number of different venues, a number of articles out there that are putting forth his ideas. So they might be able to stick. We might be able to make something happen to bring us peace instead of war. That is the hope. Now, tell us a little bit about yourself, then we'll kick back into this. Just say a little bit there, Mr.
Yeah,
Pyne.
you bet. So I started out as the Utah State Director of the EMP Task Force back in summer of 2018, and then I think a couple years later got promoted to Deputy Director of National Operations. But I'm a former U.S. Army officer, combat arms officer, as well as Army Headquarters staff officer. I served in that last capacity from 2000 to 2003 as the kind of the international programs manager for former Soviet Union, the Middle East, Eastern Europe, and a number of other countries around the world. And I've kind of my focus is pretty multifaceted, politics, elections, but really military history and national security, and obviously how to defend our country from EMP attack, but also strategic forecasting and national security strategy. And that's kind of what I've been publishing lately in the nationalinterest.org.
Oh, very good, very good. Now we are live tonight, and I'm about to pull up my chat room to sit, so we will be able to take some questions from the audience as we go along here. Everybody, what he's going to be telling us about is his ideas that relative to a potential war with Russia, how realistic he thinks this is. He's quite concerned about it, and then we're all going to be talking about a potential solution. He's got some treaty concepts he wants to go over. And I'll bring you this as part of our Eyes Wide Open and Head on a Swivel series, so you'll know what's coming at you, so you can keep your eyes open to these kind of things. And I ask you to please subscribe to my channel, bang the update notification bell, and click all, because I'll bring you more videos about things like this, and also what you need to do to take care of yourself and your family, primarily in the area of like wanting your own food and how to eat free from the weeds and the trees. But also, if we get into nuclear war, my friends, which is quite a prospect, if we have an EMP attack on us, which is even more likely prospect than a full-blown nuclear war, then my friends, we're going to be in trouble in this country, severe trouble. And if it is a nuclear war, think about this, or grand solar minimum, or a big volcanic action, or even an asteroid strike big enough, you're going to have a potential winter that's going to last for years. And what that means is that you're going to have to save those seeds before you plant them. You're going to have some long-term food storage. Right now, I got a special. If you go to prepwithgreg.com, we got $100 off a 3-month supply of this lightweight freeze-dried food. That this is a 2-week supply right here. You get 6 of these buckets, $100 off. And that has 2,000 calories a day, my friend. And John Hollerman will tell you in a hurry that most of the competitors are only offering 800 calories a day with starvation rations. This can make you survive and thrive. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 2,000 calories a day, make you a winner. Check it out, prepwithgreg.com. And if you go there, you can also go into my Patriot Supply website from prepwithgreg.com, all kind of prep and supplies there. And you really need to consider that, considering the threats that we're facing, considering the risk that we're looking at. And just listen to also the interview I did yesterday with General Krasniak and John Hollerman talking about these threats. They're real. And it's not just the EMP, there's the threats of war. So tell me, David, what do you think the real prospects are how do you think we might get into war with Russia?
Well, let me just kind of walk back and give a little history. So Vladimir Putin became acting president of the Russian Federation on New Year's Eve, 1999. So he's been preparing for 22 years. He's been preparing Russia for potential nuclear EMP and cyber war with the United States. And in doing that, he's built up Russia's nuclear arsenal with a goal of about 3,300 strategic nuclear warheads, which is over twice as many nuclear warheads as we have operationally deployed available, as well as about 5,000, let's see, nearly 5,000 theater or tactical warheads. He's got probably, I estimate, 5,000 ABMs defending Russia from a retaliatory U.S. strike. He's hardened, obviously, he's hardened Russia's critical infrastructure. He's forged this alliance with China back in 2001. They've become increasingly close because in part because of our provocative foreign policy and trying to contain Russia and China along their borders, driving them together. And then he's also he's expanded the network of nuclear blast shelters and command centers in Russia that is far beyond anything that the U.S. has ever had. So at this point, he is, he's essentially given us some ultimatums, diplomatic ultimatum to accept Russia's proposed security agreement, or else threatened us with a military technical response. He's threatened to do the same thing if Biden follows through on his threat to enact harsh economic sanctions following a potential Russian invasion of Ukraine. And he's also threatened to do the same thing to attack us if we dare deploy tens of thousands of troops along the Ukrainian border following Russian aggression. And so we're faced with a real crisis on our hands. We haven't seen anything like this since the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I think it's going to be a lot more dangerous and perilous than that. Back during the Cuban Missile Crisis, of course, we enjoyed U.S. nuclear superiority over Russia. We had, very powerful Minuteman I missiles, ICBMs. Russia was just getting started with their ICBM force, was much smaller back then. Today, the tables have been turned. Russia and China today deploy twice as many strategic nuclear warheads than we have. Russia and China have 75% of the nuclear warheads in the world today, and Russia alone has about 2/3. So we're overmatched on the nuclear weapon front. Our enemies have super EMP supremacy over us. We don't have any super EMP weapons or even any under development. They have nuclear hypersonic missiles that are operational. Russia has a number of super weapons, including the Poseidon underwater drone, which has virtually unlimited range and which can, it has 100 megaton warhead reportedly. So one Russian submarine can carry up to 6 of those. If they were to carry 6 of Poseidon missiles, that would be in excess of the total aggregate megatonnage of the entire U.S. nuclear arsenal.
Hey, David.
Yeah.
Let me speak to that Status 6 submarine that you're talking about there. That's one of the names for it. Poseidon Status 6. Yeah, sometimes they tell you it's got a 2 megaton warhead, but either way, it is sized. It is sized to be able to carry the Tsar Bomba, which is the 100 megaton nuclear warhead developed by Russia. The most powerful nuclear device ever tested in the history of mankind was a half Tsar Bomba, which was 50 megatons. That was an enormous explosion, and it far exceeded their expectations as to what it would do. It's far more damaging and took out a lot of their systems and subsystems far removed from the explosion, and nearly got the plane that delivered it. So this is a horrendous weapon, one of which is reputed to be able to take out an entire U.S. coastline if it was set up, if it was both a radioactive tsunami, which would reach far inland. So, you put about 3 of these in the United States, and our United States, it will be a landlocked nation, what's left of it. So these are, and then they got their Sarmat missile, which is claimed could actually attack the United States from over the South Pole. They could fly it over Antarctica. It's so powerful. And
Right.
it can carry enough warheads on it that they claim it could take down an area the size of France or Texas, although their videos for some reason show it going from Florida. This is a very powerful intercontinental ballistic missile. And then they actually have operational, unlike the United States, Russia and China, and now North Korea, it seems, have operational hypersonic weapons. We can't seem to build them, but North Korea can. That's really a frightening prospect to me. I need to do a video just on North Korea now, given that real soon. But yeah, North Korea just tested one yesterday and apparently hit the target with it. So we have threats here that are just off the charts, David. Now, one thing that concerns me most is this. Putin has actually talked and said that they could survive, that Russia could survive a nuclear war. If they, I don't think that's really the truth, but the problem is that seems to be his perception. If he's got that perception, you got a world leader who's got the finger on the trigger, who believes that kind of stuff. That is absolutely frightening. But I know why. I've been to Moscow. I've been in those subways. You probably have too. They're deep underground, 400 feet underground, and it's alleged that there's many offshoot systems around them. And they did a drill there, supposedly to put 40 million people in shelters, like a little over a year ago. So that is way beyond anything that we've ever contemplated here. And I've even heard they had shelters for cattle and chickens back during the Soviet days. So I don't know, but bunker barns. So they definitely have taken civil defense a lot more serious than us. It's like their government might actually care about the people, something I wish ours would. But so I think the prospects are real, just given what Putin says. And I think he kind of believes it. I don't think he's right, but I think he believes it. That's all that really matters when it comes to somebody's ability to pull the trigger. What do you think about that?
I think Russian, Chinese leaders, political and military leaders have always believed, particularly the Russians, have always believed that they can fight and win a nuclear war against the United States, and they've done everything possible to ensure their victory in the event of nuclear war. I do think that Russia as a country, certainly Moscow is impregnable against nuclear attack with all of their up to 2,000 ABMs. Defending the Moscow region. As you're probably aware, those subways would take the Kremlin leadership, the Russian government directly. There's an underground subway that goes from Moscow all the way to the nuclear command complexes, Yamantau Mountain, and other nuclear command centers in the Ural Mountains. So that's a tremendous distance. And so, I mean, the preparations, the scale of the preparations that they've done is truly massive. They have stockpiled everything, food, gold, supplies, strategic resources, everything they needed to rebuild Russian industry following a nuclear attack. And China's done much the same thing. They have what's called the underground Great Wall system, 3,000 miles of tunnels where they store strategic nuclear missiles that we can't see, satellites can't see. Obviously, they would also have command centers and bunkers for the Chinese communist leadership as well. But you're right. Ultimately, it's perceptions. Whether they could or could not survive a nuclear war, they believe they could. And so, at this point, the U.S. nuclear deterrent is not credible. It's simply not very credible anymore, and that's because we've allowed it to decay in multiple ways. We haven't produced new warheads for other than some new tactical warheads, which Trump built, which a program I opposed. We have a lot more work to do where we haven't tested nuclear warheads since 1992. We've had this moratorium imposed by President George W. Bush, and we're just not ready. We're not ready to fight a conventional war, let alone a nuclear war or an EMP cyber war against the Sino-Russian alliance. And so that's really been a great concern of mine. Now, as you mentioned, the Russians and the U.S. delegations will be meeting on the 10th of January in Geneva, and made a number of proposals for how we can negotiate a peace deal based on what Putin has offered. A lot of people have said, well, Putin's offered a number of things that are unacceptable. I'll just name a couple of them. He wants U.S. troops and Western NATO troops out of Eastern Europe. He wants the Baltic states, which are former Soviet republics, to be to depart from NATO. And he wants obviously a promise that we won't interfere in Ukraine and guarantee their neutrality, and not deploy any missiles or bombers in Europe that are in range of the Russian Federation. And so I think those proposals are not entirely unreasonable. I think there are things we can work with. Now, some of my ideas, first of all, the focus of my ideas are to break up the Russia and China, their military alliance. That has really been the focus. When I got a master's degree in national security studies back in 2000 at Georgetown, that was my oral thesis. That was going to be the existential threat, the greatest threat we would face in the 21st century. I think that's panned out thus far. We'll see if we get into a war with Russia. My prediction is that China will attack us as well, and will stage an invasion of Taiwan almost simultaneous with the Russian attack on Ukraine within a few weeks. So some of my ideas include making our acceptance of this draft security agreement conditional on a sphere of influence agreement, in which Russia and China would recognize, Russia in this case initially would recognize a U.S. sphere of influence over the Western Hemisphere. That would include obviously Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, as well as Western Europe and Japan. I think those are our core vital interests. Some of the other countries, especially in Eastern Europe, I don't think are worth the deaths of tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of Americans in possible nuclear war or EMP war with Russia. And then the other condition I would set is that the U.S. is that Russia would agree to sign a friendship treaty, or rather a treaty of friendship, cooperation, and mutual assistance with the United States, similar to what they have with China. My initial proposal was that we make it conditional upon them leaving the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is essentially a military alliance with China. But a Russian official source told me that provision was unacceptable, and he called my proposal a trap. So I've since modified it down a little bit to try to make it more acceptable to Moscow.
Well, so you basically had called for letting them have the Baltics back. Is that still part of your proposal?
Yes. So in exchange for a Russian guarantee of their continued independence, we would separate the Baltics from the NATO alliance, and they would become part of the Russian sphere of influence, along with Ukraine and the former Soviet republics. I don't believe that the Baltics ever should have been admitted to NATO, let alone Eastern Europe. And Peter Pyne agrees with me. He thinks that has done a lot to provoke Russia and the current crisis, and provoke them to ally with China.
Well, it certainly was adventurous to take them into NATO. Now, I know a lot of people, and I met a lot of people from the Baltic republics. The ones I know, they hate Russia worse than anybody I've ever met in my life. I mean, they have a severe hatred for Russia and Russians as a people, because they've been oppressed for the most part. Now, I'm sure there's some people, because Russians displaced a lot of populations and moved some of their own people in those republics too, and they did that somewhat in Ukraine and all the other republics. But this is a tough thing to do, because if you give up somebody you got an alliance with, then that's breaking a bond. And I realize we've got big stakes here, but how do you do that and still have other people trust you to make an alliance with them, like the other countries we're aligned with? How do they stay comfortable to be in our alliance and not think we're going to give them up? I mean, we just walked out of Afghanistan, and that's probably a lot to do our weakness that we're showing now with that Afghanistan withdrawal that we conducted recently, I think that set the stage to make us look weak, and it has emboldened Putin and Xi Jinping to be more aggressive against us. So I think that's hurt us. So how do we assure the rest of our allies that we're not going to back out on them, that we're going to be there for them so we can form alliances? Otherwise, we may not be capable of making alliances with anybody.
Let me just say that I believe, and you may disagree, the overriding purpose of the overriding priority, rather, of U.S. national security and of U.S. policymakers should be to preserve, protect, and defend the United States of America and the lives of its citizens. And so, when we're facing Russia and China, and we're facing these kind of real war situations where there's a very high chance, that's really higher than I've ever seen in my lifetime, or I've even heard of during the early stages of the Cold War, that we will face an EMP, cyber, or nuclear war, an attack on the U.S. homeland that could kill up to, as you know, up to 270 million Americans, according to the Congressional EMP Commission. Then you have to decide what countries are worth sacrificing the lives of over 200 million Americans. And I would venture to say that if you really thought about that, the answer might be not a lot. I would say Mexico, Canada, the Western Hemisphere. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. So yes, these are hard decisions. Giving up the Baltics to, I guess, kind of Finlandization, I would call it. It's not the best. It's not the easiest thing to do. They are our allies, but they're very small countries. They're very far removed from the United States, and they're on Russia's borders, and they're really indefensible. The RAND Corporation has run a number of war games in the last 2 decades, and the U.S. has lost every single war game in which it, tried to defend the Baltics or even retake the Baltics from Russian control.
And that's why we should never have taken them into NATO. I agree with you there, because we can't defend them. I mean, when you make an alliance to defend somebody, that means you can defend them, and you will do it. And if you make an alliance with somebody that you can't defend, that is nuts. That's kind of suicidal. And yeah, I agree with you. The primary purpose of our military is to defend ourselves. But sometimes we do need alliances to be able to do that, especially around China. I think the alliances are more important. Like we're really going to need Japan, South Korea, India, even though India is kind of in the middle between Russia and us. They hate China, but they love Russia. In fact, they love Russia better than they love us. The Indians do. They consider Russia their number one partner, but they hate
a Russian client state.
Oh yeah, they hate China. They absolutely hate China. So, oh yeah, but I got to be careful with my words here. I'm talking about how some people react to others. Now, I'd like to put a disclaimer out here. I believe there's good people in every country, every race, color, and creed, religion, in every town, city, and hamlet, every nation on earth. I've always say that. And I mean that. So sometimes so people really understand where we're coming from. I throw that disqualifier out there that we're not talking about peoples. We're talking about confrontations between organizations of states. And that's what we're facing, with leaders like Putin and Xi Jinping. You're going to find plenty of, hey, I've been to Russia. I loved it there. I absolutely loved my trip there. And I've even dated ladies from mainland China and had a lot of, Chinese friends and associates throughout my life. So I really hate it that we're in these kind of situations that we're facing in the world today. It's not fair to them or us, but that's where we're at, and we have to deal with the cards we're dealt, and we do have to defend ourselves. We have to defend, and I tell everybody, I do not advocate violence, but I always advocate defending yourselves. I don't advocate war, but I advocate being able strength. Peace comes through strength. If you're the weak kid on the playground, you're going to get bullied. You're going to get the candy taken from you or get kicked. And the same thing is still true today. Human nature has not changed for all of our civilization. We can see this today, absolutely, in the actions of Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, that we are vulnerable and we need to be strong. So that's one of the things that worries me, David, is that we are coming in this. You're talking about negotiations, but we're negotiating from a position of weakness. We should have, I think we should have done tit for tat. I think when Russia moved troops, we should have put troops somewhere close to them just to play tit for tat. That would have scared their bejesus off, and then they'll go, what are you doing? Maybe they'll have thought twice, and then no, we were that we had some resolve and we're not negotiating from a position of weakness. We you know, how do you go into negotiation when you don't have anything to trade away of great value? We got to be stronger in these things. So, and I know that sounds provocative, but I think, but what Putin did was provocative. I think sometimes you got to play chess with these guys, and you got to match what they do to some degree, just to show them resolve. That's just my opinion. What do you think?
So I think that a lot of people think that strength is a matter of attitude. It's a matter of rhetoric. Strength isn't a matter. It's not a matter of the morale or the elan of the American people. It's a matter of military strength. And in terms of actual military strength, the U.S. is overmatched by the Russian and the Chinese combined in almost across the board. And so we can, the more in a situation of military inferiority, the more stern and the more we confront our enemies, the more likely that they'll be provoked to take advantage of their current military and nuclear superiority and EMP supremacy to attack us. So I think we need to be really careful that we're not too diplomatically hard-nosed, I guess I would say. I think that's a real danger. I was listening to an Atlantic Council conference that included General David Petraeus, a former CI director. All of them advocated a lot of what you just said, and that's their belief that alliances are what makes America strong. You know, in World War II, when it was a conventional conflict, that was very true to a large extent. But today, what alliances do, particularly with small countries on the borders of Russia and China, is they obligate the United States to fight wars that are against the U.S. national security interests. What we need to do is we need to regain strategic flexibility. The U.S. should decide on a case-by-case basis, I believe, the U.S. government, whether a war is worth risking the lives of a couple 100 million American citizens. And if the answer is yes, we should fight it. If the answer is no, or if there's some uncertainty, I don't think then maybe we shouldn't fight that conflict.
Well, you know what, I got to agree with you there, and forgive me for playing devil's advocate here a little bit, but you know that's part of what an interview is.
No problem.
The thing now is that when it comes to American lives, when you ask if it's worth it to risk our lives, I think there's only really one answer to that. That's when our lives are already at risk if we don't do it. I think that is the answer to that, and if it's not that, then the answer is no. Like
exactly.
I believe in self-defense, not war. I believe in self-defense. Right. That's where I come from. So, and I've even questioned why are we in NATO? To be honest, we've had a very one-sided relationship with NATO in Europe for a long time, in which we've been paying the bills and offering our kids over there to defend those countries, and they've been skating free, not putting up their end of the bargain. They have gotten by without investing in their military because we were over there defending them. They had our boys and our mucks to cover them, and that's why their industries and their economies have been thriving so well. And it's allowed them to spend more money on social spending and so forth. A lot of people think the economies are their socialists. Some of them experimented with that. Most of them dialed that back because it was a failure. So the European countries that people think, especially the Nordic countries, that people are telling us are socialist, and that's why we need to go that way. That's not really true. But what little bit they have been able to afford, they've done so at our expense because we footed the defense bills for them. And I don't think that's fair to us. And frankly, Europe has got enough people over there. Europe is more populous than we are. They could cover themselves if they need to, and they need to come to that conclusion and take care of themselves. You know, maybe we ally with Great Britain and Australia and some of those countries, especially that we're a little closer to. But we need to consider even that in the context that you said it in. Exactly. But now, when it comes to China, I think containing China is a little different. Because they live by the seas, they trade by the seas, and we need our allies around them, be it Australia, like I said, Australia, South Korea, China, Japan, Taiwan, if we can keep them there. And that's a good question. I know you're dubious about that. And furthermore, we need to work with India. We need to start really working India a lot more. And I really believe that we're not handling that well. And frankly, I think we handled Russia really bad when the Soviet Union broke down. I think if we'd handled it right, even during the last administration, if it hadn't been for all the political turmoil in this country of accusing them of everything, we might have made peace with Russia. And it may cost us a world war not having done it. This may bring about our destruction. The fact that it was made a political game here in the United States. Well, they did this, and it was this, that, and the other. I think the shame on the people that promulgated that, because they put us all at grave risk for doing it. Far greater than anything they were bannering about for elections and whatever. That was, I don't know, that whole business. I think we lost a grand opportunity there. What do you think?
I believe that, yeah, I think we've made a cardinal error. U.S. leaders have made a cardinal error in trying to enforce this non-proliferation policy. You know, I've always believed since I was in college that the more allies, U.S. allies that have nuclear weapons, the more nuclear weapons in the U.S., the hands of the U.S. alliance, the better. And they've prevented, essentially dissuaded Germany, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan from developing and building nuclear missiles. And if they had that capability, just think about how much better off. I mean, those are alliances that matter. France and Britain have nuclear arsenals. Those are alliances that no one questions, because they're value added in a nuclear EMP cyber war scenario. Germany is, is a huge industrial power. Japan is as well. So those are all vital interests that the U.S. Should be willing to risk American lives to defend. But beyond that, as you said, as much as I love the Baltics, I look, I'm a history buff, and people ask me, what would you do to change history? What's the one thing that you would change in history to make the world a better and safer place today? And the answer is to let Germany keep its victory in 1918 over Russia, because they had, established. Granted, they were German client states, but they were responsible for the independence of the Baltic states, Belarus, Ukraine, Poland, all had been part of, in Finland, not to mention the Trans-Caucasus republics as well. So all of those states became independent temporarily, in some cases, from Russia and from the Soviet Union, and of course they possibly could have, either overthrown, strangled communism in its cradle, or at least greatly limited Soviet power, and potentially prevented, China from going communist as well. So communist China and North Korea likely wouldn't exist under that situation. They would have fought, the hot and cold wars against the Soviets on our behalf. So I would love to see. That pretty much the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk is what we have today, with all of the former Soviet republics having been liberated. So I celebrated that, our great victory in the first Cold War. But the correlation of forces has shifted greatly. Putin believes that war with the U.S. is inevitable, but I believe that only our policies make it inevitable.
Repeat
we can
that,
change
please.
our policies.
You said that real fast. You believe that Putin believes what's inevitable?
He believes that war with the United States is inevitable, and he has believed that and prepared to fight a war for the 22 years of his presidency. But
yes, he has said.
But the only thing that makes it inevitable is our policies. If we were to propose a U.S.-Russia treaty of friendship, cooperation, mutual assistance, as well as a sphere of influence agreement, and even go a step further and say, if Russia leaves their military alliance with China, we'll leave NATO. We'll pull our troops out of Europe, in the Far East. I mean, I don't think he would go for that, based on the response I got from the official Russian think tank, Ruse, which is why I kind of have planned down that part of the proposal. But if we truly had a friendship treaty, and that's basically, an alliance, almost an alliance with Russia. They have an alliance with China that's a military alliance. We could have a political alliance with Russia as well, and then withdraw our forces from Eastern Europe and Central Europe, and then that would give them a lot more security along their western frontier, and cause them to view us as a much lesser threat. And it's, as you know, it's threat perception that often causes countries to attack other countries.
Right.
Yeah, that's what started World War I.
So,
Germany was
let's
surrounded.
let's define that a little bit for our audience, because most people think that people in other countries think like we think here, and they think the same rationality and in the same way that we think, but that's not at all the case, because other countries think, you know, especially dictators and countries where they're authoritarian, they think in terms of power dynamics and strength and control, militaristic activities, and they rise to power in those countries by usually dispatching a lot of people that are threats to them. And so they tend to see threats under every rock and around every bush and every tree. And so they're naturally very paranoid, much more so than we are. We don't have any great disposition to want to go out and start a war, but they don't believe that. They don't see that. And I don't think it helped when we had politicians over here making comments like Hillary, when she talked about putting a no-fly zone over Syria and saying that she would shoot down MiGs. I thought that was rather insane. She did it on public TV in a talk show. And then you had our senator from Republican senator in this case from Mississippi claiming that we just ought to nuke Russia. I mean, that's more insane talk, and that don't help our case to calm down their fears, and that creates the perception like that. But really and truly, I don't see NATO as being an organization that ever would threaten or invade Russia. They talk about our missiles. Most of our missiles are anti-ballistic missile missiles, so they're only defense missiles. The most of what we got out there, they're not offensive in nature at all. So I don't see that as being something to equate to the kind of threat that they say it is. Now, I don't know how much what they're saying is posturing or how much they really think we threaten them. Do you think they really think we threaten them?
I think that they view the U.S. as a threat. I do not think they view Ukraine as a threat. I don't think they seriously believe that we're trying to get Ukraine into NATO, even though they keep saying that. I think they're creating a lot of pretexts. They're really playing to world opinion. You know, I guess on one side it's a good thing because that tells me they don't want to destroy the world. They may want to destroy us, and they may try to destroy us, but they're playing to world opinion. So they're trying to posture and create these pretexts, and to make it seem that their planned invasion of Ukraine and whatever other attacks they plan on the Baltics, for example, are fully justified as in defense of likely aggression from NATO. But I think that the prime motivation for Putin right now is not the threat perception. It's that he wants to realize his dream of reestablishing control over the former Soviet republics, as well as a sphere of influence over Eastern Europe, and failing a sphere of influence to ensure the neutrality of Eastern Europe between the US and Russia. And that's kind of what my proposals go to, because to satisfy those two objectives. And I think they would do so very effectively if the Biden administration were to utilize them.
I think you're right on that. That is really what he's going for. And you know, if we accepted all this stuff he puts out there, and then yeah, he wouldn't have to invade Ukraine. He would accomplish those aims by basically destroying NATO is what it would do, and it would destroy a lot of our treaties. So that's kind of alliances. So that's kind of a dubious thing in and of itself. And I know that I don't expect no one would go along with that on our side. And he knows that. So, and everybody knows he knows that. So a lot of people just think he's throwing it out there because he's planning to invade Ukraine no matter what. And he's just biding his time and will be hitting them in a very short order. Now, what you're throwing out there is the idea that maybe we can get around it with the right kind of peace treaty with them, friendship treaty, whatever you want to call it. But sans that, so if we don't go there, what you see is them invading Ukraine and then us putting forces up near there somewhere. And you thought we'd, once you take us through the scenario, because you explained to me why you think this is going to get us into a war with Russia. So tell us how you see us getting into war with Russia.
Let me just first say that I think that Putin's proposal is a sincere one. I think that they represent his minimum demands. If his minimum demands were to be met, I don't think he thinks that there's much of a chance that we'll meet his demands. But I do think that if his demands were met, that would provide him the level of prestige and achieve his aims sufficiently that he would not feel the need to invade Ukraine. That there could be what I propose is a peaceful economic integration between Russia and Ukraine in what the organization that Russia refers to as its sphere of influence, which is the Eurasian Economic Union. So I think that would be far preferable to war between Russia and Ukraine that could engulf the U.S. as well. So Biden has made clear that he is not going, and NATO as well. The UK has stated that they are not going to send troops to defend Ukraine in the event of a Russian invasion. We'll limit our support to arms, military assistance, and economic sanctions. And so what that tells me is if we don't come up with a deal, Ukraine is going to be invaded and probably annexed by Russia. Not just part of Ukraine, all of Ukraine is going to be conquered by Russia. And so that's really, when you think about in terms of a rational, realistic foreign policy, those are the options. The option is peaceful resolution that could help ensure at least nominal Ukrainian independence from Russia, or full-scale invasion that could threaten, engulf Europe and the U.S. in war. Now, in terms of how the U.S. wouldn't get involved and how it would become a World War III scenario, so as I've stated, Russia has basically stated that if we don't agree to their security agreement or something very close to it, they'll respond with military technical measures. If we deploy troops in large numbers along the Ukrainian border following Russian invasion, they'll reply with military technical means. And if we employ more severe economic sanctions, as Biden has threatened, all of these things Biden has threatened, by the way, then they'll respond with military technical means. Now, the question is, what is Biden, or what is Putin referring to when he keeps repeating a military technical response? And the answer to you and me, I think, is an EMP cyber attack. Military technical response refers to a new way of warfare, unconventional attack. It could be biological, it could be nuclear, it could be EMP, it could be cyber, it could be sabotage, it could be all of those things. And it may just be one of those things. I'm hoping it's only one. I'm hoping it's just cyber. Cyber alone could destroy our country and shut us down and help our enemies defeat us. EMP would be even worse, and obviously nuclear. We don't want to consider that option, that prospect either. So we're in a very dangerous situation. Putin means business. He's very confident that he has the upper hand militarily. He's not going to back down. So if we don't meet him halfway, then he's going to get his way either way. If we fight a war that we're guaranteed to lose over Ukraine and Taiwan, then we may lose our country, or we may lose tens of millions or hundreds of millions of Americans killed over the course of a year following a cyber EMP attack. Wouldn't it be better, perhaps, if we gave peace, gave peace a chance and tried to negotiate a deal which would secure U.S. vital interests in the long term? I mean, I think the answer is yes.
Well, all right. So the next question is, how do we get there? I mean, so you've got an idea, you've got a proposal, you're published, it's out in the public thought space. But how do you get this into the heads and minds of the people in the Department of State, into the Blinken and company, to Biden and company? How do you get, they're having a meeting in 4 days. They're starting to have these discussions with Russia 4 days from now. How do you get that in there? And can our people help? I mean, we got contact numbers. We can have people call in Washington, D.C. I can bring up this Freedom Restoration Foundation home site the website that I've got, telling people how to make contacts with their Congress critters and various representatives. So how do you see this getting transacted? How do you see your ideas getting some traction right now in the short term? Because we don't have a lot of time. I mean, time is almost up.
I think it's a real challenge. The problem is we have a lame duck administration, the Biden administration. All statements to the contrary. President Biden is not going to run for re-election. and therefore it's, it is a lame duck administration. And so we have a lot of people whose appointees are not democratically appointed. They're appointed or elected rather. They're appointed by the president, and they're fairly insulated against the kind of popular backlash that the Americans might have in terms of persuading the administration to do something more sensible or more rational or more conservative, however you want to phrase it. And so the best resort I can think of, when I've been telling people throughout interviews, with your listeners and other talk shows as well, is to reach out, is to send copies of my article, links to my articles to your senators, your congressmen, ask them to reach out to people of influence in the administration, or just simply to get them to people like Tucker Carlson, for example. I know for a fact Tucker Carlson's even I wouldn't say pro-Russian, because I'm not pro-Russian in the least, but he is more much more even than I am willing to consider major compromises with Russia, thinking that Russia is not the huge threat that we all believe it is. So Tucker Carlson is one that I've been trying to reach unsuccessfully, but I think he has a big megaphone. I think he has links with President Trump. I think if President Trump were to come out and say, this is madness, we don't want war with Russia over Ukraine, let's kind of settle down and negotiate a deal which respects Russian vital interests, I think that would have a tremendous effect. I think a lot of Republican congressmen would take their cues from President Trump and say, yeah, maybe we don't want to send troops to Ukraine, get into war with Russia, with the Baltics, or whatever the case might be, and might be able to find some common ground and come up with a peaceful resolution of the conflict.
Are your papers or articles on the EMP task force website by any chance?
So the paper that I do have is let's see, it's called Blackout Warfare: What America needs to do to ensure its national survival. And that paper is a 17-page paper. It's on the EMP task force site. So if you go to the website at EMP task force,
let me bring it up. I'll just share it right now.
Yeah, you bet.
Here we go, guys. Here it is. Here is the EMP task force website. This is it right here. Welcome to the EMP Task Force on National Homeland Security, which David is the deputy director of. So where do I find there's Dr.
So right under latest news. If you click the first link under latest news on the right.
Latest news. Let me go now. News from Dr. Peter Pyne.
Right under Peter Pyne's latest news in orange.
I see it. I see it.
Which
one of these is it?
It's the top one.
What U.S. leaders must do to deter a catastrophic Sino-Russian cyber EMP nuclear attack and to ensure America's national survival. Well, now, yeah, preventing those kind of attacks is definitely, here he is, blackout warfare.
So this is a report I published back in early October. It's a 17-page report. I've sent it to all the members of Congress here in my home state of Utah, and it lays out the threat. It lays out the threat we face from Russia and China. It states that we cannot fight or win a war against Russia and China combined, and they're allies. So if we fight one, we'll fight the other. And then it lays out my proposal for a sphere of influence agreement, which would worked very well to keep the peace with the Yalta Accords. The Yalta Agreement back in 1945 kept the nuclear peace, great power peace, for half a century. And then finally, it lays out 6 critical recommendations for what we can do to rebuild our military and nuclear strength, including, of course, EMP hardening and doubling our nuclear arsenal, the size of our nuclear arsenal, building 5,000 ABMs to defend America against nuclear ballistic missile attack. So
you and I talked about that in our previous session also.
Right.
I just put the link to this report directly in the chat room so people can see that. And I also have this thing called the Freedom Restoration Foundation, which gives you a lot of stuff about how to contact your congressmen. Go over to the Action Center part. and this has got how to find your representatives, how to track bills, and how to contact them. I have to go back and double check to see if we got the White. You can go to whitehouse.org if you're going to get the White House, guys. I'm not sure I got that one listed in here. This is more congressional oriented. So let me share that in here too, just that particular page, so that people can see that. There you go. So there is the report to share, and there is the means to share it, folks. So we just gave you both, where you can be active to try to help preserve our future, the future of America, the life of ourselves. Because as you see it, I think this is the prospects of getting something like you're talking about are not. So let me be charitable, or somewhat less than absolutely spectacular. What do you think about that?
What's your question? I'm sorry.
I believe the prospects for getting an agreement with Russia on the order of what you're talking about here is somewhat less than absolutely spectacular.
Yes, unfortunately, I'm afraid that the Biden administration, they're reportedly staffed at the upper levels of the State Department with members of the Atlantic Council, which are very pro-NATO. They're very, they have this belief that alliances are the be-all, end-all, that is kind of the secret weapon, if you will, against Russia, and that Russia fears us because we have all these allies, no matter how small they are. Montenegro, of course, has, maybe 500,000 people. That's the most recent addition to the NATO alliance.
Oh, we added Montenegro to it? Oh, wow. Well, I really feel safe now. I'm so glad.
Right. So there's all these different countries. If Russia or their allies were to attack even one of them, it could force us to respond as under the Article 5 provision, the collective security provision that calls on all NATO members to come to the defense of a nation that's been attacked. And that could get us into a nuclear cyber EMP war, which our country in all likelihood will not survive. So that's why I've described NATO as a noose around America's neck. I was very supportive of NATO during the Cold War. I think the fact that we shifted NATO's borders far to the east along Russia's border was a huge mistake, which has largely provoked the current conflict with Russia.
One of our viewers says, where's the control over the Caspian Sea lie in all this war talk? I don't know how that plays into it, but is there anything specific that you would address vis-a-vis the Caspian Sea? I'm just trying to answer some user questions here, some viewer questions.
So there is a current crisis in Kazakhstan where the government has come under assault, a popular assault from the people, the Russian backed government, and Russia has pulled out all the stops to intervene. They've activated the Article 4 of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, which is their NATO alliance. And they're intervening with Russian paratroopers and at least 3 or 4 other members of their alliance. And so they're moving in what looks to be, I'm wondering, is this the first step, the first domino to fall to Putin's quest to reestablish the old Soviet Union? I mean, it could be. Certainly, it could be a prelude to Russia and its allies attacking Ukraine.
I did see troops firing on protesters. That's pretty gross. It's pretty obscene.
Just like in China.
And yeah, China, Tiananmen Square. You don't know whether it was Russian troops or Kazakh troops. That was not immediately obvious, but this is a frightening thing there. The people there, they want that noose off their neck. People everywhere want to be free, but the governments don't want to allow that. So this is a big concerning thing. But on the other hand, if Kazakhstan turned really ugly on them, maybe that would get them so wrapped up they wouldn't be able to do much in Ukraine. What do you think? Is there a possibility that Kazakhstan could go south on them real hard and occupy them in such a way that they would not be able to pull off their Ukrainian ambitions? Or do you think that that's not a chance?
I think the chances of that are pretty low. Kazakhstan is of course the largest former Soviet republic other than Russia, the Russian Federation, but it's not very populous. It doesn't have a large army or large military establishment, and obviously, Russia's intervening on the side of the dictator there, the president of Kazakhstan. So I think the chances of them being bogged down in Kazakhstan are quite low. They haven't diverted any forces from the Ukrainian front. They've got 120,000 troops massed there on the Ukrainian border along the northern, eastern, and southern borders. So they've almost got Ukraine surrounded. It looks like, in terms of how their invasion would go, some people are predicting they just occupy the eastern half of Ukraine. But it does seem to their positioning of troops in Belarus, which is a Russian ally, seems to indicate that they would be going for Kiev as well, and Western Ukraine. Plus, their troops, they have amphibious forces in the Black Sea, with their bases in Crimea. It looks like that they would try to attack them,
right?
Yeah, they try to occupy Odessa, which is on the southwestern Ukrainian border with Moldova.
Okay, so once again, we got a lot of people probably in the chat room wasn't in here earlier. So you've served in the U.S. Army as an officer, and you were quite involved. Tell us your position again vis-a-vis Eastern Europe and these nations. I just want our audience to hear this because you've got the experience. You've been there. You've dealt with this stuff. Tell them once again, just to repeat. I know you said it earlier, but for the new people that's just joined the chat room, if you'd repeat that, they might appreciate that.
You bet. So I was the international programs manager for Eastern Europe, the former Soviet Union, and Middle East, in addition to other regions. I was in charge of all research and development cooperation, weapons cooperation with other, technological cooperation in the military area with those countries. We weren't doing a whole lot back then. This was 2000 to 2003. So we were talking about trying to cooperate with Russia, maybe in areas, in the missile defense area. President Putin, declared that he wanted to explore maybe setting up a joint missile defense system in Europe between the U.S. and Russia. That didn't really materialize. So most of my dealings were at the time more with the Middle East than even Eastern Europe, which only had joined NATO, began joining NATO in 1999.
So the bottom line is that you're putting out a proposal for peace that you see as the only real chance. You think that without something like this, we're going to be at war with Russia. And you see that as practically inevitable. What's the chances if we go into this treaty with peace that Russia's going to honor their side of it?
So I think that Russia doesn't have a good track record, as you allude to, when it comes to keeping their agreements, particularly in the area of arms control. However, they're much better at keeping agreements that suit their interests, and this agreement would suit their interests, because it has incentives built in that if they were to leave their alliance with China, that the U.S. would withdraw from NATO and pull out all its troops from Europe. And with this cooperation treaty, the Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation, Mutual Assistance, we could be sharing military technology with them. Obviously, that'd have to be bilateral. They have a lot of really important military technologies that I'd love to get my hands on. So I think it would greatly benefit us if that were, if actually to occur. But I think there's a good chance that they would do it, because I think it satisfies Putin's objectives, because it would recognize, the U.S. would recognize a Russian sphere of influence in all the former Soviet republics, and then we basically make Eastern Europe kind of a buffer zone in between the U.S. sphere of influence in Western Europe and the former Soviet Union.
And one of our people says, hey, they don't need to kick the bear. They're absolutely out of their minds, is what one of our guys just said. Yeah, kicking a bear can be a problem right now. I've said don't poke the bear previous in some of my videos. This is we're in a grave situation here, people. How many of you people, just I'd like to see what people think in the chat room about this kind of agreement, because guys, we're really on the precipice of war here, and this might possibly get us through it. I've always said that what we ought to do is get Russia on our side and have an alliance with them against China, because even Russia knows in the long run their biggest threat is China more than anyone. Not us, it's really China. China's the one that would go in and take at them. So I think maybe we if Russia were on our side, that China would not be so adventurous, and we could have peace with Russia. You know, when I walked around in Moscow back in March of 2010, you know, I'm looking at people, they're just like us, you know, and you walk around and go, well, why in the world would we want to destroy this place? And why would they want to destroy us? And the answer really is that shouldn't be the case. But that's where we're at today, and it may very well happen. It very, very, very well happen. And so this is why we need to work this, guys. So I'm getting some people say they agree with it. All right, so there's a paper trail leading straight to Papa. And you're talking about Putin. I don't know what that is, but yeah, we're getting a lot of agreement. So guys, if you agree with that, then the thing to do is go back and check the I'm going to share it one more time. I'm going to go grab this link to his document here, and we're going to put it back in my chat room here. Here's the resource. Then go to this action center here and try to use this. I set this website up, and I'm paying for it myself, guys. So, but this gives you the tools to try to promote peace. It may be our last chance. But I would say outside of that, as I said earlier, and David agreed with me. Unfortunately, I wish he would argued with me, but I don't know how he would. That our prospects are somewhat less than absolutely spectacular. That we are facing some extremely worrisome times now, guys. And I think that the most likely attack might be an EMP attack, because it would so render us, the United States, is no longer existent. Essentially, we would not be a country anymore if we got hit with the EMP attack. And EMP super weapon would probably nullify our ability to even respond militarily with our strategic weapons abroad, to include our submarines at sea, because they wouldn't receive those EAM messages that they need in order to launch what they've got. So I think with it, an EMP strike could really take us out. And there's just too many countries that could do that to us right now. And as David pointed out, they could just about do the same with cyber attack. And one thing that Dr. Peter Pry has often told us, and many others, is if we get hit, it's probably a multi-pronged attack of cyber, direct kinetic attack, EMP, and other things. And we've seen evidence of perhaps a dry run of that back in, I believe it was April 16, 2013, when there was an attack on the Metcalf's power substation that serves San Jose at the very same day that the North Korean satellite first flew over Washington, D.C. And it so happened at that time frame, there was the Chung Chung gang steaming around in the either the Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico with the two fully erect missiles in ISO shipping containers on that ship, which we later found buried under bags of sugars that went through the Panama Canal and got caught going back to North Korea. So, and I worry a lot about a potential attack coming out of Venezuela with all the stuff going down there between their involvements with China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia.
Yeah, let me just say, I do think there is a chance, even if we don't come to terms with Russia, if we make a serious, we try to make some serious concessions, and it just doesn't work out because both sides are too intransigent. I think if Biden were to refrain from deploying U.S. troops along the frontline states with Belarus and Ukraine, there's a chance that Russia wouldn't attack us. My greater fear is, even if that doesn't happen, that I believe China will follow Russia's invasion of Ukraine within a matter of a few weeks and invade Taiwan. And Biden, surprisingly, even though he was basically elected with communist Chinese electoral interference as president, he's basically stated that he thinks that the U.S. Should come to Taiwan's aid in the event of a Chinese invasion. And I'm afraid that China views that as very suspiciously and might attack us, even if he didn't end up doing anything, merely because he's made those kind of statements. They might do a preemptive strike on the eve of their invasion of Taiwan, just to take us out with cyber and EMP.
That goes back to perception, what we said earlier. It's the perception, and we've set the perception. So yeah, I have thought that China might attack us prior to attacking Taiwan, just to clear the field, to get us out of their way, so then they won't have to worry about us. And they could potentially do that. And again, they could do it, off the shore of Venezuela, and we wouldn't know who did it or why. That's what I worry about from the attack of that type. Or they could use their hypersonic cruise missiles, which could come in from anywhere, or all the above. So we are very vulnerable right now to so many things. So what David just pointed out is two prospects for world war, or at least us to lose our grid and be destroyed as a nation right here in the very near term future. So what you need to take from this discussion, my followers here, my friends and followers, is that we need to take several actions. One, we need to promote peace every way we can, and use what tools we got, such as the things that David has provided to us. Use the action center I've just shared with you for how to contact Congress critters and such, and talk this up and try to promote peace as much as you can. Secondly, prepare like you've never done it before, like your life depends on it, because it just may do it. I think the chances are greater that it does depend on it than not. Right now, I'll be 62 in a couple months, and I was a kid during the, I grew up. I was in the Army during the Cold War. I was 2 years old in the Cuban Missile Crisis. But I actually remember seeing, when I was a little kid, seeing Castro in the newspaper, and I asked my mom what that was. She said, he's a bad man. I was just a little bitty thing. So this is the case that I can't ever remember a time like this. I can't in my life remember a time that was this close to conflict. I mean, I've never seen anything like this in my life, not even close.
Yeah, and the threat level has been raised by the Biden administration to DEFCON 3 reportedly during the past 4 weeks. So obviously they view that the threat of nuclear war as real. The DEFCON alert system is basically an indicator of how close we are to World War III that's potentially nuclear. DEFCON 1, of course, being nuclear war. So
that is the war.
Let's hope we don't get to a DEFCON 2 situation in the next month or two. The last thing I'd like to tell your listeners is that, is to please look up my name. Just do a Google search, David T Pyne, national interest, and it'll pull up an archive of my articles on the national interest. The latest article I feel is the most important. That's not covered in the EMP report, which I do.
Let me qualify. The national interest is it's a magazine. It's an Intel type magazine. They've got a good website. They've got a lot of good articles. I go to a lot of my content I get from the national interest, by the way. It's a very good resource to go to. So you check out the national interest itself, but that he's not just talking the term, he's actually talking about a website. So that's what he means when he says search his name with national interest, because you're going to find his articles there. So a lot of people may not be aware of what you meant by that. So I just thought I'd qualify your point there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, so if you could look up my latest article, which is entitled "Biden Needs to Conclude a Peace Agreement with Russia to avoid war over Ukraine." Send that link to your members of Congress. Ask them to try to do everything they can to promote those ideas, whether it's on Hannity or Tucker Carlson, or contacts with the Biden administration, or perhaps most importantly, any contacts with President Trump himself, who is a supporter, I believe, of peace with Russia and demonstrated that during his 2016 campaign. And try to reach out to voices that are obviously have a lot bigger megaphone than I do.
Okay, very good. Well, guys, and again, I said, you know, you need to be proactive. Let's, you know, a lot of other, I'm a prepping channel. Most prepping channels don't do anything other than tell you to prep. So I'm telling you to, first off, let's try to prevent this, because an ounce of prevention is better than a gallon of cure. Even if the chances are slight, it's worth fighting for. Even if the prospects are very slim, there's still some hope there. As long as you got hope, you run for that hope. You fight for that hope, because that's hope. That's what may keep us alive. And we just may prevail with it. So always prevail toward hope and work toward that. And let's try to keep this stuff from coming to pass. But secondly, really seriously consider your prepping every way you can, and consider your alliances with your friends, neighbors, and families, and how you're going to get through this time coming at us. Our time may be very, very short, maybe very short. I'm hearing other people talk in February. Now, see, there's got to be an intersection of times. If the Chinese are going to move shortly after the Russians need frozen ground to move on, and which means they need to do it here this winter, which is very soon. But the Chinese really need a good sea state to hit Taiwan, which is after winter. So I would say right toward the end of winter, Russia might be moving, and just a little bit later, as the seas calm down, Taiwan might be taken. So that's the kind of time frames we might be looking at potentially. Now, I'm not saying that these things are going to happen. Don't say Greg Allison said that's going to be this or that's going to be that. These are strong prospects, guys. I'm saying this is possible, and I'm really concerned about it, given what we're seeing in the world today. The signs, it looks as if this is what we're facing. It looks as if unless something major happens, that we're at war. And I hope this is wrong. I hope and pray this is wrong. The final thing that I didn't mention is pray. Get right with your maker. And that's not really the final thing, but also, you know, work with your family. Never forget to tell the people around you you love them, because you don't know when's the last chance you're going to get to do that. And let's tackle this thing from a position of love than hate, because I always tell you guys that as light dispels dark, love dispels hate. And we've got to work it from that angle. We've got to reach out to people with our hearts, but we've got to be willing to defend ourselves with the other means if we need to. But absolutely, we have to be able to defend ourselves. But let's try to preserve peace in every way we can. Let's try not to go down this road, but just be very aware right now that the risk of it are beyond anything I've ever seen in my life. I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen anything close to this. And if you had asked me 20 years ago if this is where we were going, I wouldn't have believed it. Of course, if you'd asked me, well, I won't go into that here. That's another video. I'm really astonished about the things that's happened in the world in the last just 2 or 3 years. The turn of events that we've had. Oh yeah, by the way, David, just for a point of humor, because we probably need something like that given our discussion here. You realize that 2022 is the year that Soviet Green was set in?
No, I remember watching that as a kid. Yeah, it's hopefully we don't see that. Cannibalism without people knowing it. Yeah, that's a scary future there.
Well, grid down might lead to something like that. You know, especially wouldn't want to be in a city with the grid down, guys. You need to consider, if you're in a city, you might want to start thinking about how you get out of there, and be thinking real fast, because it may be just what you're going to see in the cities.
Yeah.
So that might have been a documentary instead of a movie. So I think the main movie that was a documentary was Idiocracy.
Yeah, that's all really good advice. I mean, I couldn't agree more. If you're in an urban area, try to move to a rural area, or you know, stay with family members. I think February is the biggest month in terms of the most likely time for Russia to invade. I think this month's unlikely at this point. I think you're right. I think China would probably invade late February or March. But we definitely need to, all of us, myself included, we need to get right with our Maker, Creator, Jesus Christ, as you said, and you know, try to be repent of our sins and pray. And you know, when our government fails, the government fails to protect us, God can protect us if we strive to do His will and keep His commandments. I totally agree with that.
And what gives me faith and confidence, I've got the belief that somehow, no matter what, in the end, we win. but it may be a rough ride along the way, and we may take a lot of really hard hits, but it may be gruesome beyond imagination. But in the end, I am convinced we win. I hope that's not a fantasy that's beyond reality, but I do believe that.
Yeah. Well, we know God wins in the end.
That's right.
Regardless of America's fate, what I've been telling people is, even if the United States of America were to collapse, Americans are very resilient. We would eventually come together and build a new country on the ruins of the ones we lost, and that would include our God-given Constitution and our proud flag of the United States of America.
Amen.
So
Amen.
I really believe that. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be interviewed on your show. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for coming here. And that is the source of where I believe we win, by the way. And it is because of the faith. And I have told my followers, I often say, hey guys, we got to survive this. And on the other side of it, we should often build a better world. And that's exactly what you've said here. So that's why we prep and do what we do. David, thank you so much for coming on here and for sharing this, because I think this is a very vital thing in a very vital time. The times we're living in are just off the charts here. But I think you painted a pathway that we could follow for hope. And so I want to encourage my viewers to do what they can, because we're proactive in this channel to try to build a better future in every way we can. So thank you so much. I hope to have you on again.
Thank you.
In the not too distant future. If you got some other tidbit you want to talk to us about, let me know. My audience, I believe they thoroughly enjoyed having you here, because you've been very informative. You've got a strong background. You know this area. You're one of the top experts when it comes to some of these matters. So I appreciate it, David. And I appreciate everything you do with the EMP Task Force of National Homeland Security. And I'm proud to serve the state director in that area. So thank you.
Appreciate
David.
you as well, Greg. Thanks so much.
All right, anyway, so folks, we're going to call it a show with that. I just want to thank everybody for being in the chat room. I want to thank the mods. We had a lot of Russian trolls in the chat room tonight, throwing stuff out, and they've been taking care of the Russian trolls. So I thank my mods for the work in that area. And I thank, again, everybody for watching. So thank you all, and we'll have a good night. So with that, I'm going to say,